We begin in Knoxville, Tennessee, where on Monday, Joel Guy Jr. goes on trial for killing and dismembering his parents. The facts of this case are horrific, including reports that the defendant's mother's head was found in a boiling pot of water. Our Chanley Painter is live in Knoxville. We'll get to her in just a few minutes, but first, here is some background.
Police responded to a welfare check at Joel and Lisa Guy's home the Monday after Thanksgiving 2016 and made a horrific discovery. Butchered body parts in multiple locations, according to court documents, some simmering, some soaking in corrosive chemicals.
It's evident what happened to these folks. It's evident that they were stabbed multiple times. It's evident that their bodies were, cut up. But that evidence is not damning against any one person, right? They have to show who did it.
Prosecutors in Knoxville, Tennessee say that person is the couple's own son, Joel Guy Jr. The 32-year-old faces 7 counts, including first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. Prosecutors allege Guy was visiting from Louisiana when he killed his parents.
The state's motive in this case is that he was a perpetual college goer and his parents were footing all the bills, and they were going to put a stop to that.
Knoxville News Sentinel reporter Jamie Satterfield has covered the case from the beginning.
My assumption was that Joel Guy Jr. Would be somebody that was insane, that there would be mental illness, but I have not heard anything about any kind of mental health issues, any kind of diagnoses or anything like that you would expect in a case with this level of violence against your own parents. And in fact, Joel Guy's mother's head was found in a pot on the stove.
In addition to the body parts, investigators said they found containers of chemicals in the house and receipts for the purchase of those chemicals. Authorities said they traced one of those receipts to a Knoxville Walmart, where Guy was allegedly caught on camera 2 days before the bodies were found.
Some of the best evidence that the state has came from the bedroom where Joel Guy Jr. was staying during this Thanksgiving weekend in 2016. They got a laptop, and it has some history on it where he was searching for chemicals that could dissolve bones. That's very incriminating.
Guy was arrested the day after the bodies were found in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where he lived, and brought him back to Tennessee to stand trial. Guy tried unsuccessfully to suppress evidence seized from his parents' home, but did convince a judge to bar evidence seized from his home in Louisiana. The defendant tried but failed to delay the trial based on concerns that COVID-19 restrictions would violate his constitutional rights. But a court official says measures are in place to address coronavirus concerns.
The biggest issue we've had is the public has called when they've gotten their jury summons, and they've said, well, we don't know that we want to come down there because of the COVID. And so we've assured them that we've taken these precautions, and so most of the people have come.
Joining us live now from Knoxville, Tennessee, Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter. Chanley, good evening to you. This is a trial that we will be showing, gavel to gavel, on Court TV starting Monday morning at 9 o'clock. But it's going to look a little different than the trials that we've covered in the past.
That's right, Ted. So juries during a pandemic, it's going to look different from what we're used to on Court TV, because here in Knox County, they're following strict COVID-19 guidelines. So in the courtroom on Monday, the jury will be spread out. There will be about 4 or 5 in the jury box, and then the rest will be in the gallery, taking up one side of the gallery roped off. Of course, masks are mandatory for everyone inside the courtroom. It'll be limited seating in the courtroom. There's plexiglass on the witness stand and covering the judge's box where he will be. All of it happening, like you said, Monday live, 9 a.m. with the jury of 12 with 4 alternates to be sworn in before we hear those all-important opening statements. And the prosecutor yesterday during jury selection already warning prospective jurors about the graphic nature of the facts they will hear starting Monday in this trial. And if you read any of the court documents, you will see the judge calling this not an ordinary crime and not an ordinary crime scene, Ted.
Oh yeah, the details are absolutely horrific. What more do we know about the condition of the bodies of his parents?
Well, we know that the condition of the bodies, it was difficult for those responding and those detectives who conducted that initial welfare check back in 2016 to even know the identity of the people in the house, because as soon as they entered the house, the heat was all the way turned up. There was a head boiling on the stove in a pot. There was blood everywhere. As they made their way up to the second floor, they could hear a dog barking, but they entered one of the bedrooms. They found severed body parts. They found other body parts in the bathroom in containers dissolving in some sort of acid. It was a very gory, gruesome scene, and something I'm sure they did not expect to walk into. We also know that they did finally identify the victims through neighbors who lived there, of course, the autopsies. And we know that Joel Sr., he was a designer, an engineering designer. He was 61 years old. Lisa, his wife, was 55 years old. She was an HR administrator, and they'd been married for 33 years, Ted. This was a couple who was well known in the community. In fact, in their obituary, they were true soulmates, adored their grandchildren. They had a love for life and travel. They loved laughter, and that they would be missed. I mean, this gruesome death, of course, shocked the community. We spoke to the local reporter, Jamie Satterfield, and she talked about how much an impression this left. Let's listen.
The public reaction to this case was strong. One of the reasons is that the guys, Lisa and Joel Sr., were well respected in this community. They were good people. Lisa Guy worked at Jacobs Engineering, which is a fairly major company around these parts. And so when Lisa didn't show up for work, people started panicking at that point. And then, of course, very soon after, law enforcement learned what had happened to them. So people that knew the guys were shocked and upset. And then as news started to leak out about the condition of the bodies and the fact that the suspect was their son, that drew a lot of attention around here. So this has been a case that people have read a lot about. They've paid attention to it, and people are asking me about this trial, so I know people are really interested in watching this trial.
At the time of their murder, the couple was actually in the process of moving out of their home. It was a very nice home. They just sold it. In fact, we're expecting to hear from the coworker who called in Lisa Guy as a missing person that day from work to testify about the fact that that was Lisa's last week on the job there at the office, and that there was a special luncheon in her honor that day. So that's what drew so much concern about her whereabouts, why she didn't show up for work. We're also expecting to hear from another co-worker who will tell the jury about Lisa Guy, saying she was a doting mother, that she worked to support her son's education, Ted.
Yeah, it sounds like the son was a habitual college goer, as Jamie Satterfield called him, someone who was not ready to take that next step. The idea that anybody could do this to their parents or to anybody, it is so horrific and conjures up just nightmares. What do we know about this defendant?
Well, we know that he's 32 years old. He is a lifelong resident of Louisiana. He actually attended and graduated from a boarding school in Louisiana before he went on to attend George Washington University and LSU. He's a very intelligent man. His parents actually moved out of Louisiana in 2008 before they eventually made their way here to the Knoxville area. But we know that he has given an impression throughout this court process. This happened in 2016. And again, Jamie Satterfield has been following this case from the very beginning, watching him throughout this process. Let's listen to her impressions of Joel Guy Jr.
This is a guy who's very intelligent. He's very engaged in his defense. When his attorneys won't file a motion he wants filed, he files it and essentially the judge let him make his own case on a motion a couple days ago. So that's what's most unusual to me about this, is it's hard for me to look at a young man, he's 30 in his 30s, but who's so intelligent and very aware of what's going on, but rather emotionless about what he's accused of.
You know, I did say he attended LSU, Ted, but he actually was a non-matriculating graduate student, so he wasn't enrolled. He portrayed that he was a graduate student. That's what his parents were allegedly paying for, but he was not enrolled, according to court documents. And further, interesting story about his lead defense attorney, Mark Stevens. He's actually retired from the public defender's office. But he was on this case before he retired for 3 years representing Joel Guy Jr. And so when he retired, he actually filed a motion with the judge asking to stay on the case pro bono. He said that this is something he's been working on, invested 3 years of his career in, and he had a good working relationship with Joel Guy Jr., who is a little eccentric, and he wanted to maintain that relationship for his defense.
Yeah, the creep factor in this one is off the charts. A little eccentric is a good way to put it. But what do we know about the trial? How long is it going to expect it to be? How is this judge going to conduct business, hours, et cetera? What are we expecting?
Well, on Monday, live Court TV, 9 a.m. Eastern, we're going to have opening statements, and this trial is expected to last about a week. Ted, we have a list of over 40 potential witnesses for the prosecution. They'll start calling after opening statements Monday. Now, the kicker here is we don't quite know about the defense in this case. I've scoured through court files. Even in court documents, most recently, even within the last couple of weeks, the judge is even saying in court documents that there's no indication really of a defense theory as of yet. Only indication that the judge had in this court document was maybe some issues attacking the identity of the murderer and maybe raising some reasonable doubt. So I guess the length of the trial depends on what the defense may be and whether or not they'll call any witnesses.
Yeah, well, it's going to be fascinating to see what kind of defense they do put up. Chanley Painter, you'll be there, and we'll be here Monday morning, 9 o'clock Eastern, right here on Court TV, a live trial. We hope you join us. It should be fascinating.